If you own a Ferrari 360 and find yourself in a situation looking like this because you had the famous gearbox cooler rupture and found that your synchros are going bad, and particularly when the transmission warms up, you're missing gears, keeps kicking yourself into neutral, etc., faults. The coolant very quickly destroys the synchronizers. Now you can look this stuff up yourself and probably much better than I am, but these pieces are the synchros, and they do not last long at all when they have coolant on them. So just as a little tip, once you've broken down a transmission, there are already videos around on how to do it. You will end up with this input shaft assembly and the counter shaft assembly. The synchro components are near these sliders for this pair of gears, this pair of gears, and then this pair right here on the end. Now, these lower gears can be pressed off, and there's things that you can do with shimming and setting up this bearing that you absolutely do not want to touch, and that's outside of most people's, probably including my pay grade. The reason I'm posting is because this shaft has been broken down, as you can see. This is a very, very eerily similar gear set out of a Maserati Quattroport with the Duo Select from the early 2000s. There's some interesting similarities and also some problematic differences. If you look, the gears, even though they are incredibly similar, they're splined the opposite direction. If you have problems with crown teeth or these gears worn out, these will not fix your problem. Same with the pinion. The whole setup, because it's arranged differently, fits different. What may fix your problem, though, are the reverse synchro assembly and the synchro assemblies for 1st through 6th have the same part number from Ferrari. Now, theoretically, if you can find a good condition, low mileage, and you're the kind that wants to roll the dice, a transmission from the Maserati, because they don't have that cooler, you have higher odds of finding one that still have good synchronizers in it. So I take no responsibility if you screw your car up doing this, because it's not the worst if you're patient, but it's not for the faint at heart. I have some tips to try and help make it easier if you want to attempt this repair yourself. First, this input shaft assembly here needs to be supported while you thread off some of these components on it I'm going to show. And this spline on it is very, very similar to a late 60s, I believe, differential yoke from a Chevy. I had to polish this up a little bit, but this assembly, I'm going to grab the wrong one here, will basically stand in it like that and hold it for you so you can work on it. Now, why that matters, right here are two fairly tight nuts that hold this assembly from coming apart. You'll notice that this bearing is encased in plastic. If you heat this too much, it's going to melt and you're going to trash the bearing, and you're going to have to buy it from Ferrari. Now, the answer is to take a heat gun and work around this with it set on about 600 or 800 degrees, try to focus the heat in here, and warm it up until the Loctite starts to smell funny. And I think you'll know when you get there. And the other advice I have for getting it loose, Ferrari makes a special tool. Maybe you don't have it. These wrenches you can get on Amazon are pretty useful, but a lot of people's first instinct is to grab a punch and try to hit this, which makes sense, but you'll start knocking the corners off. You'll actually do less damage using a semi-sharp chisel and getting it into the corner and just giving it a couple of good smacks to get it to start to turn. If you have to fight it hard, then it's not hot enough yet. So make sure it's clean, make sure it's hot, because if you're not careful, like I wasn't the first time, you'll start to mar it up a little bit. That's not too bad, but not beautiful. The next warning with that, these shaft assemblies have some odd differences where they hide snap rings. You can download or find or whatever the Ferrari 360 transmission rebuild manual, you will find some odd little differences with where they put snap rings on a couple of these shafts. If you do this, if you get a gear puller and you need a big long gear puller, Harbor Freight makes one that's pretty useful for it. I can post the part number 2 if somebody needs. But if you start trying to pull these components off, my next big piece of advice is, if you start to pull on something fairly hard and you think, wow, I'm starting to really tighten on this and it's not moving, you probably missed something, and there's a trick, because somewhere inside of there is probably a hidden snap ring. Now, another warning that I have, this section right here you can see is threaded, because this, I destroyed the first one. Luckily I didn't need to keep it. This collar nut is designed to thread onto it. Now, they make a special tool for this, and you can, I guess by looking, I didn't have it at first. My advice is, there are two, hold on. It has 2 sections on it, here and here on this one, where they hit it with a punch from the factory to stake it into the shaft right here, and same on the opposite side. It is staked very, very tight. I cut a screwdriver very sharp in the exact correct width and very patiently knock it in there. If you do not remove this well, you will make the mistake that I did the first time. This one also seems to have Loctite on it. Same deal. I don't care if it takes a full 5 minutes of standing there bored. Heat it up with a heat gun, not with a torch, with a heat gun, until it starts to smell funny. And then you should just take some gentle tapping and it will spin loose. It's also in a bit of a recess inside of a gear, so it's very tricky to get the right tool on that one. Now, of all the damage that I found, interestingly, when you take the case apart, this will be one of the first things in the rear of the transmission you take off before you even open the main case. This is, if I remember correctly, the reverse synchronizer and gear set. You'll notice I have all the components together and zip tied so they don't get lost. But this was the most severely burnt one from the poor lubrication with the coolant. So check it closely. Now, this is a pretty standard synchro hub and slider. They have specific ways that they fit together. You can notice it's got a flat section every third of the way around, and inside of here there's a flat section that corresponds with it. When you take one apart, these little balls and springs like to go everywhere if you are not careful, and they're tricky to put back. There are videos on how to do it. I also would like to show, because it's a dual synchro assembly, actually I didn't think I have all the pieces here, but that's okay. There's an inner and outer piece, but when you put it together, this one you'll see has a large gap in 3 spots where it lines up with its corresponding gear. This piece goes inside of it. You have to make sure that it lines up like that, so that the teeth from this lower unit do not interfere with these gaps of where it mates with its gear. So be careful with that one. On the countershaft assembly, when you pull it apart, what am I doing here? Okay. Also worth noting, once you put this gear on, if I remember correctly, there's a snap ring inside. The hub inside of this slider, one side of it has a recess machined into it to clear over that snap ring. If you get it flipped over, it won't push down far enough. And what you'll find is it won't press down enough to be able to get that snap ring on. Ask me how I know. So just some quick tips and tricks if you want to roll the dice, if you catch it early. Now, if you take one of these apart and your pinion is fried, or it's singing loud, or your ring gear is fried, that is probably beyond the scope of most people, and the parts are a fortune. These bearings are a fortune. So this is probably for the kind of person that caught theirs early and doesn't mind taking the time to break down a couple of gearboxes, organize everything, lay it out, label it. You'll notice I have cardboard put down. If you chip a gear tooth, you're done. If you're not careful using a gear puller, you're done. Some of this I did use a shop press for. I don't know if it's completely necessary, but it helps. It was also very tricky on some of these parts to hold everything lined up and clocked together while you press it on. So some of it you may have to hold upside down or hold something up while you press it, or you have to do something really clever, because if you slip and they come misaligned, you can start breaking tabs and damaging things when you put it back. Make sure to use high strength Loctite when this goes back on. And like I said, there's one buried in here, somewhere in here. I think it's between these. Make sure that you use Loctite when that one goes back on as well. Last small tip, I'm gonna be honest, I forgot where this was at, but this ring sometimes is difficult to remove, and it almost seems like it's a shrink fit, and it covers over the top of a snap ring, and you'll try to pull a component off and you can't figure out why, and you can't find the snap ring. Well, this has to come off. On mine, I had to heat this bugger on one of them. Luckily, I had a good one to keep, but I had to heat it, and then it finally was just almost fell loose, and I was able to expose the snap ring to get it apart. So I hope this is useful. If you need one fixed, I suppose you can let me know. But there you have it. Good luck, everyone.